Alright guys, let's do our fifth and final video of the evening, and let's get back to the reading.
To be hauled in short, so as to be ready to trip the anchor and move the steamboat at once if necessary. "Will they attack?" whispered an awed voice. "We will all be butchered in this fog," murmured another. The faces twitched with the strain. The hands trembled slightly. The eyes forgot to wink. It was very curious to see the contrast of expressions of the white men and of the black fellows of our crew, who were as much strangers to that part of the river as we, though their homes were only 800 miles away. The whites, of course, greatly discomposed, had besides a curious look of being painfully shocked by such an outrageous row. The others had an alert, naturally interested expression, but their faces were essentially quiet, even those of the one or two who grinned as they hauled in the chain.
So, this is Marlowe contrasting the reactions to hearing the noise from the pilgrims and the manager, the white men on board, versus the cannibals. And so looking at those two different reactions and what that says about them.
Several exchanged short, grunting phrases, which seemed to settle the matter to their satisfaction. Their headman, a young broad-chested black, severely draped in dark blue fringed cloths with fierce nostrils and his hair all done up artfully in oily ringlets, stood near me.
Notice the comparison between the pilgrim who stood near him in the pink pajamas tucked into his boots, and then this cannibal who they say, they call savage or whatever. And the way that he's described is almost, what's the word at 11:45? Distinguished with the artful draping and the clothes. So just something to keep in mind as well.
"Aha," I said, just for good fellowship's sake. "Catch him," he snapped, with a bloodshot widening of his eyes and a flash of sharp teeth. "Catch him. Give him to us." "To you, huh?" I asked. "What would you do with him?" "Eat him," he said curtly, and leaning his elbow on the rail, looked out into the fog in a dignified and profoundly pensive attitude. I would no doubt have been properly horrified had it not occurred to me that he and his chaps must be very hungry, that they must have been growing increasingly hungry for at least this month past. They had been engaged for 6 months. I don't think a single one of them had any clear idea of time, as we at the end of countless ages have. They still belonged to the beginnings of time, had no inherited experience to teach them, as it were.
So again, comparing the cannibals to like a primitive man or a man that came before with no real sense of time. But when he says they've been engaged for 6 months, that means that they were hired on, for that amount of time. And you're starting to wonder, what are these cannibals eating now that I think about it?
And of course, as long as there was a piece of paper written over in accordance with some farcical law or other made down the river, it didn't enter anybody's head to trouble how they would live. Certainly they had brought with them some rotten hippo meat, which couldn't have lasted very long anyway, even if the pilgrims hadn't, in the midst of a shocking hullabaloo, thrown a considerable quantity of it overboard. It looked like a high-handed proceeding, but it was really a case of legitimate self-defense. You can't breathe dead hippo, waking, sleeping, and eating, and at the same time keep your precarious grip on existence.
I love that sentence for sure, but the idea that throwing the hippo meat over was self-defense.
Besides that, they had given them every week 3 pieces of brass wire, each about 9 inches long, and the theory was that they were to buy their provisions with that currency in riverside villages. You can see how that worked. There were either no villages, or the people were hostile, or the director, who, like the rest of us, fed out of tins, with an occasional old he-goat thrown in, didn't want to stop the steamer for some more or less recondite reason. So unless they swallowed the wire itself, or made loops of it to snare fishes with, I don't see what good their extravagant salary could be to them.
So look at the pointlessness of that. They're paying the cannibals with brass wire they can use for trading, but they're not stopping anywhere where anyone can trade. And they really haven't come across any village where there was a trading place. And so just the pointlessness in the way they're paying them, and they feel like, okay, well, I can check that off because, we're paying them well, but they're not paying them in a way that allows them to get what they need.
I must say, it was paid with a regularity worthy of a large and honorable trading company.
Meaning they never missed a
For the
payment.
rest, the only thing to eat, though it didn't look edible in the least, I saw in their possession was a few lumps of some stuff like half-cooked dough of a dirty lavender color they kept wrapped in leaves, and now and then swallowed a piece of, but so small that it seemed done more for the looks of the thing rather than any serious purpose of sustenance. Why, in the name of all the gnawing devils of hunger, they didn't go for us, they were 30-5, and have a...
So what is he wondering? When I put all this in perspective now, when I actually stop and think about it, I'm wondering, why didn't they just go ahead and eat us? Because they outnumber us 30-5.
tuck in for once amazes me now when I think of it. They were big, powerful men, with not much capacity to weigh the consequences. With courage, with strength, even yet, though their skins were no longer glossy and their muscles no longer hard. And I saw that something restraining, one of those human secrets that baffle probability, had come into play there. I looked at them with a swift quickening of interest, not because it occurred to me that I might be eaten by them before very long, though I own to you that just then I perceived, in a new light, as it were, how unwholesome the pilgrims looked, and I hoped, yes, I positively hoped that my aspect was not so, what shall I say, so unappetizing.
Those kind of crazy thoughts that come to your mind, but you would never tell anybody else. Whenever I see a fire alarm, I just really want to pull it. I don't go around just saying that or anything, but I do have that thought. I don't know why. But anyway, Marlowe starts thinking about things from the cannibal's perspective, and he sees how unwholesome, like how unappetizing the pilgrims looked, and he has this crazy thought where he hopes that like he looks better, like more appetizing, which of course, you wouldn't want, but it just came across his mind. And since he's telling us things as they come across his mind, we're getting all of the thoughts put together, even the crazy ones.
Of fantastic vanity, which fitted well with the dream sensation that pervaded all my days at that time. Perhaps I had a little fever, too. One can't live with one's finger everlastingly on one's pulse. I had often a little fever, or a little touch of other things, the playful paw strokes of the wilderness, the preliminary trifling before the more serious onslaught, which came in due course.
So what does he foreshadow there? What is he saying is going to happen to him later on in the story? Yeah, that he's going to get sick, that these were just playful paw strokes, but that later on something, is going to make him really sick. I like the line that one cannot live with one's finger always on one's pulse. I'd like you to think about what you think he means there.
Yes, I looked at them as you would on any human being, with a curiosity of their impulses, motives, capacities, weaknesses, when brought to the test of an inexorable physical necessity. Restraint. What possible restraint? Was it superstition, disgust, patience, fear, or some kind of primitive honor? No fear can stand up to hunger. No patience can wear it out. Disgust simply does not exist where hunger is. And as to superstition, beliefs, and what you may call principles, they are less than chaff in a breeze. Don't you know the devilry of lingering starvation, its exasperating torment, its black thoughts, its somber and brooding ferocity?
So Marlowe here again talking out loud, and he's wondering what has kept these cannibals from eating them. And he goes through that list of things he wonders. And then he explains how horrible hunger is, and how that doesn't seem like any of those things could stand up to hunger. It's a basic need that has to be met first before you have morals or before you're repulsed and all the other things that he listed. And so he's really trying to think out loud about, what did keep the cannibals from eating them? Do they have something holding them back from doing what they think would be right or wrong? If so, then that seems to counteract everything that he's heard about and seen presented with the natives that they call savages. Because if they're really that savage, wouldn't they have already eaten them? Why would they have even cared? They don't have education, and they don't have, like a Christian, considered to be like a conservative, religious structure. So where would that kind of morality come from? And that's a really big question that Marlo's asking himself. And I want you to really think about this big question too. Um, what would be holding the natives back from eating them? And what does that say about what we're learning about the natives versus the company men, and who's savage to who, and what they do?
It takes a man all his inborn strength to fight hunger properly. It's really easier to face bereavement, dishonor, and the perdition of one's soul than this kind of prolonged hunger. Sad but true. And these chaps, too, had no earthly reason for any kind of scruple, restraint. I would just as soon have expected restraint from a hyena prowling amongst the corpses of a battlefield. But there was the fact facing me, the fact dazzling to be seen, like the foam on the depths of the sea, like a ripple on an unfathomable enigma. A mystery greater, when I thought of it, than the curious, inexplicable note of desperate grief in this savage clamor that had swept by us on the riverbank behind the blind whiteness of the fog.
So he's talking about this enigma and this puzzle and this mystery, and he says that that's even greater than the noise that they're hearing in the bank from the fog. So again, he takes it from this philosophical point back to the story, tying them both together with this idea of trying to figure it out, like what's going on. And so looking at the words again that are describing the screams going on in the fog.
Two pilgrims were quarreling in hurried whispers as to which bank. Left? No. How can you? Right, of course. It is very serious, said the manager's voice behind me. I would be desolated if anything should happen to Mr. Kurtz before we came up.
Huh.
I looked at him, and had not the slightest doubt he was sincere. He was just the kind of man who would wish to preserve appearances.
All right, we've talked a lot about appearance versus reality, and what Marlo has learned about the manager is that the manager can't stand Kurtz. So when he's sitting there saying, well, I hope nothing happens to him if we get delayed, Marlo says, well, I think he's being sincere, but just for appearances, like the kind of people that make things up or say something in the moment so that they can feel better about whatever happened or how they handled it.
His restraint. But when he muttered something about going on at once, I did not even take the trouble to answer him. I knew, and he knew, that it was impossible. Were we to let go of our hold on the bottom, we would be absolutely in the air, in space. We wouldn't be able to tell where we were going to, whether up or downstream or across, till we fetched against one bank or another. And then we wouldn't know at first which it was. Of course, I made no move. I had no mind for a smash-up. You couldn't imagine a more deadly place for a shipwreck. Whether we drowned at once or not, we were sure to perish speedily in one way or another. I authorize you to take all the risks, he said, after a short silence. I refuse to take any, I said shortly, which was just the answer he expected, though its tone might have surprised him. Well, I must defer to your judgment. You are captain, he said with marked civility. I turned my shoulder to him in sign of my appreciation, and looked into the fog. How long would it last? It was the most hopeless lookout. The approach to this Kurtz, grubbing for ivory in the wretched bush, was beset by as many dangers as though he had been an enchanted princess sleeping in a fabulous castle.
I love that. final comparison of Kurtz being the princess that we're all trying to get to, and all the dangers and obstacles in the way. Well, this is as far as I'm going to leave you. If you'll just finish through page 42 for our next class.